In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like cosmic tides, there exists a universal truth that every species learns. Survival depends on knowing when to fight and when to flee. The Zephyrians mastered this lesson after their first encounter with the Void Hunters. The Crystalline Collective understood it when they met the machine swarms. Even the mighty Caraxian Empire grasped this fundamental principle when they faced the energy beings of Nexus Prime. But there was one species that no galactic database could properly catalog. One race whose behavioral patterns defied every known model of intelligent life. They didn't follow the standard protocols of conquest, surrender, or negotiation that governed interstellar relations. When cornered, most species either submit or lash out in desperate fury. When threatened, they calculate odds and make rational decisions about survival. When facing overwhelming force, they seek terms, find compromise, or accept defeat with whatever dignity remains. Humans did none of these things. When humans were cornered, they didn't just fight back. They studied their enemy with the cold patience of a predator sizing up prey. When threatened, they didn't calculate odds of survival. They calculated weaknesses and strike points with surgical precision. When facing overwhelming force, they didn't seek terms or compromise. They went hunting. This is the story of how the galactic hegemony learned that lesson the hard way. This is the story of how an empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds discovered that some prey, when pushed too far, reveals itself to be something far more dangerous than any predator they had ever imagined. This is the story of what happens when aliens realize that humans don't negotiate. They hunt with precision. The first mistake the galactic hegemony made was assuming that humans would react like every other species they had conquered in their 3,000-year reign across the spiral arm. The second mistake was believing their own intelligence reports about human behavior. The third, and perhaps most fatal mistake, was thinking that a species with such a short lifespan and limited technology could pose any real threat to an empire that spanned 47 star systems. Admiral Vextar stood before the massive holographic display in the command center of the dreadnought Inevitable Dominion, his 4 arms crossed behind his carapace as he studied the blue-green world rotating slowly in the projection. Earth, they called it. The third planet in a system the humans designated Sol, though the hegemony's stellar cartographers had already assigned it the more proper designation of Conquest Node 847 Delta. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, its white clouds swirling over brown continents and blue oceans. Vextar's compound eyes could detect the geometric patterns of cities scattered across the land masses, the thin lines of transportation networks, and the occasional glint of orbital installations. A civilization, certainly, but nothing that appeared remotely threatening to the assembled might of the hegemony's 5th Conquest Fleet. 300 warships hung in formation around the Inevitable Dominion, their hulls gleaming with the dull metallic sheen that marked them as products of the hegemony's vast industrial complexes. Each vessel was a masterwork of military engineering, equipped with plasma cannons capable of reducing continents to slag, shield generators that could deflect the combined firepower of lesser fleets, and troop bays filled with the finest soldiers from a dozen conquered worlds. Status report. Vextar commanded, his voice carrying the authority that came from successfully subjugating 31 different species during his century-long career. Sub-Admiral Kenthare approached the command pedestal, her 6 legs clicking rhythmically against the metallic deck plates. As a member of the arachnoid Skethri species, she had earned her position through exceptional tactical analysis and an encyclopedic knowledge of conquest protocols. Her species had been among the first to join the hegemony voluntarily after witnessing what happened to those who resisted. Our long-range sensors have completed their survey of the human defensive capabilities, she reported, her translated voice carrying through the bridge's audio systems with mechanical precision. The species maintains approximately 200 orbital platforms of various configurations, ranging from communications satellites to what appear to be rudimentary weapons platforms. Their ground-based defenses consist primarily of missile installations and energy weapons of limited range and power. Vextar nodded, unsurprised by this assessment. Naval forces? Miniman Gendaziplit, 63 vessels total, most of which appeared to be designed for system patrol rather than deep space combat. The largest of their warships masses less than 1/20th of our smallest frigate. Their weapon systems appear to be chemical propellant projectiles and primitive directed energy weapons. Troop strength. Our intelligence suggests a global military force of approximately 50 million individuals, though this number includes what the humans term reserves and civilian militia. Active military personnel number closer to 15 million across all branches of their various national military organizations. The admiral allowed himself what his species considered a smile, though the expression would have looked more like a grimace to human eyes. 15 million soldiers. The 5th Conquest Fleet alone carried 20 million hegemony troops, each one equipped with powered armor, energy weapons, and centuries of accumulated tactical knowledge from successful campaigns across the galaxy. And their response to our arrival? Vextar inquired, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Consistent with hegemony's psychological profiles for pre-conquest species, Kinthare replied. Initial panic, attempts at communication, and what appears to be preparation for both resistance and negotiation. Several of their political entities have attempted to establish contact through conventional radio frequencies. The messages follow predictable patterns: requests for dialogue, offers of cooperation, and warnings about their defensive capabilities. Vextar's primary attention focused on the tactical display, but a portion of his enhanced neural network was already analyzing the conquest timeline. Standard protocols called for a 72-hour period of psychological pressure, during which the target species would be allowed to contemplate their hopeless situation. This was followed by a formal surrender demand, and, if that was refused, a demonstration of power that typically convinced even the most stubborn species to reconsider their position. The process rarely required more than a standard week from arrival to complete capitulation. The longest conquest in recent memory had been the Thexlani system, where a particularly stubborn species had held out for 3 weeks before accepting inevitable defeat. Even then, their resistance had been more philosophical than practical. They had possessed neither the technology nor the strategic thinking necessary to pose a genuine threat to hegemony forces. Humans would likely prove even more cooperative than most. Intelligence reports suggested they were a fractured species, divided into competing political entities called nations that frequently engaged in conflicts with one another. Such internal divisions typically made conquest easier, as the species lacked the unity necessary for coordinated resistance. Initiate standard intimidation protocols, Vextar ordered. I want our full fleet visible to their optical and electronic sensors. Begin with orbital positioning maneuvers that demonstrate our superiority in numbers and firepower. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, their various appendages dancing across control surfaces as the massive fleet began its carefully choreographed display of power. Warships moved into positions that would be clearly visible to Earth-based telescopes, their formations spelling out geometric patterns that unmistakably indicated intelligent control and hostile intent. For 6 hours, the demonstration continued. The fleet moved through formations that showcased their mobility, firepower, and technological superiority. Plasma cannons fired controlled bursts into empty space, creating brilliant displays of energy that would be clearly visible from the planet's surface. Shield generators hummed to life, creating shimmering barriers of force that deflected asteroids and space debris with casual ease. Throughout the display, the communication channels remained active. Human transmissions poured in from dozens of sources across the planet, their voices carrying the expected mixture of fear, confusion, and desperate hope. Political leaders demanded to speak with fleet commanders. Military officials transmitted readiness reports and defensive positions. Scientists sent complex mathematical equations, and star charts, apparently believing that demonstrations of intelligence might somehow stay the coming conquest. But as the hours passed, Admiral Vextar began to notice something unusual in the pattern of human communications. While the initial responses had followed predictable patterns, the more recent transmissions were different. Instead of increasingly desperate pleas for negotiation, the human communications were becoming more focused, more organized, and strangely methodical. "Subadmiral Quintare," he called out, his compound eyes shifting to focus on the communication analysis displays. "Are you monitoring the evolution of human response patterns?" The arachnoid officer scuttled closer to the central command pedestal, her own sensors analyzing the incoming data streams. "Yes, Admiral. The pattern shift began approximately 2 hours ago. Instead of the expected escalation in panic responses, we're seeing increased coordination between their various political entities." Coordination of what nature? Initially, it appeared to be preparation for surrender negotiations. Multiple human governments were establishing joint communication protocols and selecting diplomatic representatives. However, our linguistic analysis computers are detecting subtle changes in the content and tone of their transmissions. Vextar's attention focused more intently on the tactical displays. "Explain." "The humans appear to be gathering intelligence on our fleet composition, movement patterns, and tactical capabilities. Their questions during communication attempts are increasingly specific about our technology, command structure, and strategic intentions." This gave the Admiral pause. Intelligence gathering was a normal response for species facing conquest, but it typically focused on discovering potential avenues for negotiation or surrender terms. What Quintare was describing sounded more like military reconnaissance. "Show me examples of their current communications," he ordered. The main display shifted to show a collection of human transmissions, their words translated into hegemony standard through the fleet's linguistic processors. Admiral Vextar read through the messages with growing interest. The first transmission came from what appeared to be a military organization. "We acknowledge your presence in our system and your superior numbers. Before we proceed with discussions, can you clarify the operational parameters of your plasma weapon systems and their effective range in planetary atmospheric conditions?" The second was from a different source. "Our governments are prepared to discuss terms, but we need to understand the command structure of your fleet. Are decisions made by individual ship commanders, or is there a centralized authority? What are the communication delays in your command network?" A third message read, "We recognize your technological advantage. For the purposes of establishing appropriate diplomatic protocols, could you provide information about your standard conquest procedures? Do you typically offer integration opportunities for existing military personnel, or do you prefer complete political restructuring?" Admiral Vextar stared at the communications display for several long moments. In 300 years of conquest operations, he had never encountered target species that asked such specific questions about tactical capabilities and operational procedures. Most species facing overwhelming force focused on negotiations about survival, territorial autonomy, or cultural preservation. These humans were asking about weapon ranges, command structures, and conquest protocols. They were gathering operational intelligence with the systematic thoroughness of military professionals preparing for combat operations. "Sub-Admiral," he said slowly, "initiate deep spectrum analysis of human military installations and troop movements. I want real-time monitoring of all significant force dispositions on the planet." "At once, Admiral." The sensor arrays of the inevitable Dominion turned their full attention toward the planet below, penetrating atmospheric interference to provide detailed imagery of human military activities. What they revealed caused several bridge officers to emit sounds of surprise in their respective species languages. Across the planet's surface, human military forces were not preparing for surrender negotiations or defensive positions. Instead, they were conducting the most rapid and comprehensive mobilization that Admiral Vextar had ever witnessed. Military bases that had appeared inactive hours earlier were now bustling with activity. Transportation networks were moving personnel and equipment with clockwork precision. Manufacturing facilities were shifting production to military applications at a rate that suggested months of advanced preparation. Most concerning of all, the humans were not simply preparing to defend their planet. They were positioning forces for offensive operations. Subadmiral Kentare reported, her voice carrying a note of confusion that was rare for the normally composed officer. Human force dispositions are inconsistent with standard pre-conquest behavior patterns. They appear to be preparing for aggressive action. Vextar studied the tactical displays with growing unease. The human military response was unlike anything in the hegemony's extensive database of conquest scenarios. Every other species they had encountered had followed predictable patterns. Initial shock, desperate attempts at communication, preparation for either defense or surrender, and eventual capitulation when faced with overwhelming force. The humans were doing something different. They were preparing for war with the methodical efficiency of a species that had been planning for this moment for much longer than the few hours since the fleet's arrival. Communications, open a general broadcast channel to the planet, Admiral Vextar commanded. Full power, all frequencies. Channel open, Admiral. Vextar's voice carried across the electromagnetic spectrum, translated into dozens of human languages by the fleet's communication systems. People of Earth, I am Admiral Vextar of the Galactic Hegemony 5th Conquest Fleet. Your world has been selected for integration into the hegemony. You have 72 standard hours to prepare for unconditional surrender. Resistance will result in the destruction of your civilization and the elimination of your species. This is your only warning. The response came within minutes, transmitted simultaneously from multiple sources across the planet. But instead of the expected pleas for negotiation or expressions of defiance, the human response was something that Admiral Vextar had never heard before in 3 centuries of conquest operations. Admiral Vextar, the human voice said, its tone carrying a calm professionalism that was somehow more unnerving than screams of fear would have been. This is General Patricia Morrison, speaking for the United Earth Defense Command. We have received your ultimatum and wish to inform you that it has been rejected. We do not negotiate with invaders, and we do not surrender to threats. You have chosen to enter our system with hostile intent. We consider this an act of war. The communication channel remained open, and General Morrison's voice continued with the same unsettling calm. We have spent considerable time studying your arrival, your fleet composition, and your tactical capabilities. We have analyzed your weapon signatures, your ship classifications, and your operational procedures. We have also studied the historical records of your previous conquests, transmitted to us by refugees from the Thexlani system who escaped your last campaign. Admiral Vextar felt something he had not experienced in decades of military service: genuine surprise. The Thexlani refugees have been scattered across multiple star systems after their homeworld's capitulation. The humans had somehow located and communicated with them suggested a level of intelligence gathering capability that their technology should not have supported. We know how you operate, Admiral, General Morrison continued. We know your standard conquest timeline, your psychological warfare tactics, and your preference for avoiding prolonged campaigns. We know that you expect us to follow the same patterns as every other species you have conquered. The human's voice paused, and Admiral Vextar found himself waiting for the next words with an attention that was becoming increasingly focused. We also know that you have never encountered a species like humanity before. You think of us as prey to be harvested, as another entry in your conquest database. This is your fundamental error in judgment. Subadmiral Kentare approached the command pedestal, her multiple eyes reflecting concern. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. The humans appear to be powering up significantly more military infrastructure than our initial surveys detected. General Morrison's voice continued through the communication systems. You see, Admiral, you've made the mistake of assuming that because we appear primitive and divided, we are weak and unprepared. You've assumed that because our technology seems inferior to yours, we lack the capability to threaten your operations. Most critically, you've assumed that we will respond to your ultimatum the way other species have responded. The tactical displays around the bridge began showing updated readings from the planet below. Weapon emplacements that had not appeared in initial scans were now powering up across multiple continents. Orbital facilities that had seemed to be civilian installations were revealing military capabilities. Underground installations were opening to reveal defensive and offensive systems that should not have existed given human technological limitations. These assumptions are incorrect, General Morrison continued. Humanity has been preparing for this moment for longer than you might think. We have studied the patterns of galactic conquest, analyzed the tactical doctrines of aggressive species, and developed countermeasures specifically designed for scenarios such as this one. Admiral Vextar realized that the human communications were being transmitted in real time, not just to his fleet, but across multiple frequencies to what appeared to be every human military installation on the planet. The humans were not just rejecting his ultimatum. They were coordinating their entire species' response with unprecedented efficiency. We know that your standard procedure is to allow 72 hours for psychological pressure, followed by a demonstration of power, followed by final surrender demands. We know that you prefer to avoid damage to potentially valuable infrastructure and population centers. We know that your ground forces are trained for occupation rather than prolonged combat operations. The Admiral's attention was now completely focused on the communication, his earlier confidence beginning to transform into something approaching concern. What you do not know, Admiral, is that humanity has never surrendered to superior force. In our entire recorded history, when faced with overwhelming odds, we do not negotiate. We do not seek terms. We do not calculate probabilities of survival and choose the path of least resistance. General Morrison's voice carried a quality that Admiral Vextar was beginning to recognize as something far more dangerous than anger or desperation. When humanity is threatened with extinction, we do not react like prey animals seeking escape or negotiation. We respond like apex predators that have been challenged in their own territory. We study our enemies with the patience of natural hunters. We identify weaknesses with the precision of evolved killers. We coordinate our attacks with the ruthless efficiency of pack hunters that have learned to take down prey much larger than themselves. The tactical displays now showed that human military forces across the entire planet had achieved full combat readiness in less than 6 hours since the fleet's arrival. This was not the panicked mobilization of a species facing unexpected invasion. This was the activation of a carefully planned and extensively prepared defensive system that had been waiting for exactly this scenario. Your ultimatum has been received and rejected, Admiral Vextar. You have 72 hours to withdraw your forces from this system. This is the only warning you will receive from humanity. The communication channel closed with a finality that left the bridge of the inevitable Dominion in unusual silence. Admiral Vextar stared at the tactical displays, his compound eyes analyzing the rapidly changing situation below. For the first time in his career, he was facing a species that had not responded to the threat of conquest with fear, desperation, or resignation. Instead, he was facing a species that had responded to his ultimatum with a counter-ultimatum of their own. The humans, it seemed, had been hunting him from the moment his fleet entered their system. Admiral Vextar had commanded fleets through 43 successful conquest campaigns, but he had never experienced 18 hours quite like these. What should have been a routine period of psychological pressure had instead become an intensive education in human tactical doctrine, and every lesson was more disturbing than the last. The bridge of the inevitable Dominion had taken on the atmosphere of a war room rather than the command center of a routine conquest operation. Officers from multiple species worked at their stations with an urgency that reflected their growing awareness that this campaign was unlike any in their experience. The tactical displays that normally showed static defensive positions and panic population movements now revealed a planet-wide military organization that seemed to operate with supernatural efficiency. Report: Admiral Vextar commanded as he approached the central command pedestal where Sub-Admiral Kinthare was coordinating intelligence analysis. The arachnoid officer turned multiple eyes toward her commander, her usual composure showing signs of strain. Admiral, the human military response continues to exceed all predictive models. In the past 18 hours, they have achieved a level of mobilization that our databases suggest should require weeks of preparation. Show me the current tactical situation. The main holographic display shifted to show Earth in three-dimensional detail, with military installations, troop movements, and defensive positions highlighted in various colors. What Admiral Vextar saw defied his understanding of how pre-conquest civilizations were supposed to behave. Instead of the expected pattern of isolated defensive positions and uncoordinated resistance, the humans had achieved something remarkable: complete global military integration. Forces from dozens of previously independent nations were operating under unified command structures. Resources were being shared between former enemies with clockwork precision. Military units were moving across international boundaries as if such political divisions had never existed. How is this possible? Admiral Vextar asked. Our intelligence indicated that this species was highly fractured, with competing political entities engaged in regular conflicts. That assessment appears to have been accurate for their peacetime organization, Sub-Admiral Kinthare replied. However, our threat seems to have triggered some form of emergency protocol that instantly unified their entire species under centralized military command. Sub-Admiral Zexcoin approached from the communications station, his elongated head displaying the color patterns that indicated significant concern among his species. Admiral, we've been analyzing the content of human communications during their mobilization period. The results are unprecedented. Explain. The humans are not just coordinating defensive operations, Zexcoin reported. They are actively gathering intelligence on our fleet, analyzing our tactical patterns, and developing countermeasures in real time. More concerning, they appear to be treating our entire fleet as a single target for detailed study. Admiral Vextar's compound eyes focused more intently on the communications officer. What do you mean by single target? Human communications reveal that they are analyzing our fleet as a biological researcher might study a specimen. Admiral, they're mapping our command structure, identifying key vessels, analyzing our formation patterns, and cataloging our weapons capabilities with scientific precision. They refer to our fleet not as an invading force, but as a target system with identifiable vulnerabilities. The Admiral moved to examine the communications analysis displays himself. What he found there was unlike anything in the hegemony's extensive database of pre-conquest species behavior. The humans were conducting military intelligence operations with a sophistication that suggested decades of preparation for exactly this scenario. Show me examples of their current intelligence gathering efforts, he ordered. The display filled with intercepted human transmissions, their words translated into hegemony standard. Target analysis complete for vessel designations Alpha 1 through Alpha 47. Confirmed command ship is the large dreadnought at Formation Center. Estimated crew complement 8,000. Primary weapons systems appear to be plasma-based with effective range approximately 50,000 kilometers. Pattern analysis of fleet maneuvers suggests standardized tactical doctrine consistent with occupation-focused rather than combat-focused training. Recommend exploitation of formation gaps during transition phases. Intelligence from Thexlani sources confirms enemy preference for psychological warfare over direct engagement. Suggests that extended resistance will force tactical changes that favor our operational advantages. Xenobiology reports indicate that primary species uses compound visual systems optimized for broad-spectrum awareness rather than focused targeting. Recommends stealth approaches using visual disruption techniques. Admiral Vextar stared at the intelligence summaries with growing unease. The humans were not just preparing to resist. They were systematically analyzing his forces with the methodical thoroughness of predators studying prey. More disturbing, their analysis was accurate. The fleet formations were designed for intimidation rather than combat efficiency. The weapons systems were optimized for planetary bombardment rather than ship-to-ship engagement. The crew complements were configured for occupation duties rather than extended combat operations. How are they obtaining this level of detailed information? He asked. Multiple sources, Admiral, Sub-Admiral Kentare replied. They have contacted refugees from previous conquest campaigns. They are conducting passive sensor analysis of our electromagnetic emissions. They are even using computational modeling to predict our tactical responses based on observed behavior patterns. Sub-Admiral Zexcoin added, most concerning, Admiral, is that they appear to be sharing this intelligence with combat units across their entire planet in real time. Every human military organization now possesses detailed technical specifications for our fleet. The tactical display shifted to show current human military dispositions, and Admiral Vextar felt his confidence in the campaign's inevitable success beginning to waver. The humans had not simply mobilized their existing forces. They had reorganized their entire military structure specifically to counter the hegemony's tactical advantages. Ground-based forces were positioned not for territorial defense, but for coordinated strikes against landing zones that would provide the best approach angles for assault on hegemony ground forces. Naval units were deploying not to defend coastlines, but to positions that would maximize their effectiveness against troop transports attempting planetary landings. Air forces were concentrating not at major population centers, but at strategic locations that would allow them to exploit the formation gaps that their intelligence analysis had identified in the hegemony fleet. They are not preparing to defend their planet, Admiral Vextar realized aloud. They are preparing to hunt our forces. The observation drew the attention of the entire bridge crew. In the hegemony's 3,000 years of galactic conquest, no species had ever treated an overwhelming invasion force as prey to be hunted. The very concept was outside their understanding of how intelligent life responded to superior force. Admiral, Sub-Admiral Kentare reported, we're receiving another general transmission from the Human Command Authority. Display it. The main communication screen activated to show a human in military uniform, her appearance suggesting middle age by human standards, but her eyes carrying an intensity that transcended species barriers. The background behind her showed what appeared to be a command center filled with sophisticated monitoring equipment and tactical displays. Admiral Vextar, the human began, this is General Morrison. I wanted to provide you with an update on our analysis of your fleet capabilities and inform you of some conclusions we have reached about your tactical situation. Admiral Vextar found himself listening with complete attention. In his experience, communications from target species during the intimidation phase typically consisted of pleas for negotiation or expressions of defiance. Educational briefings on tactical analysis were completely unprecedented. First, General Morrison continued, we want to acknowledge that your fleet represents impressive technological capabilities and overwhelming numerical superiority. Your plasma weapon systems could indeed reduce our cities to ash, and your true capacity exceeds our total military personnel by a significant margin. The human paused, and Admiral Vextar noticed that her expression did not reflect fear or resignation, but something closer to professional interest. However, our analysis has revealed several tactical limitations in your current operational posture that we believe you may not have fully considered. The display behind General Morrison shifted to show a detailed schematic of the hegemony fleet formation, with various tactical annotations and vulnerability assessments. Admiral Vextar realized that the humans had constructed an intelligence picture of his forces that was more detailed than some of his own tactical officers possessed. Your fleet formation is optimized for intimidation and planetary bombardment, but it presents significant vulnerabilities to coordinated small unit attacks. Your command structure appears to be centralized around your dreadnought, creating a single point of failure for fleet-wide operations. Your troop transports are designed for uncontested landings rather than assault operations against prepared defenses. General Morrison's presentation continued with the dispassionate precision of a military briefing. Most significantly, your tactical doctrine appears to be based on the assumption that target species will respond to superior force with either submission or disorganized resistance. This assumption has created blind spots in your operational planning. Admiral Vextar found himself taking notes on the human's analysis, a behavior that would have seemed absurd hours earlier, but now felt entirely appropriate given the unprecedented nature of the situation. We have also analyzed the historical patterns of your conquest campaigns, General Morrison continued. Your success rate is indeed impressive, but it depends entirely on target species following predictable behavior patterns. When faced with overwhelming force, they attempt negotiation, prepare static defenses, or surrender after token resistance. The human's expression shifted slightly, and Admiral Vextar detected something in her features that he was beginning to recognize as the look of a predator that had cornered particularly interesting prey. Humanity does not follow these patterns, Admiral Vextar. We have studied your tactics, identified your weaknesses, and prepared countermeasures specifically designed to exploit the operational vulnerabilities that your success against other species has created. We are not preparing to negotiate with you, resist you, or surrender to you. General Morrison leaned forward slightly, and her next words were delivered with a calm certainty that was somehow more intimidating than any threat could have been. We are preparing to hunt you. The communication ended, leaving the bridge of the inevitable dominion in silence. Admiral Vextar stared at the now blank display, his compound eyes trying to process information that had no precedent in his military experience. Sub-Admiral Kinthare, he said finally, what is our current assessment of human military capabilities compared to fleet defensive systems? The arachnoid officer consulted her tactical displays before responding. Based on our initial surveys, human weapons technology is approximately 2 centuries behind our standard systems. Their most advanced warships cannot penetrate our shields, and their ground-based weapons lack the power to damage our hull plating. That assessment was based on our observation of their apparent technology level, Admiral Vextar noted. Are we certain it remains accurate? Sub-Admiral Kinthare paused, her multiple eyes reviewing the tactical data with enhanced focus. Admiral, the humans have demonstrated capabilities during their mobilization that were not evident in our initial surveys. They appear to have been concealing significant portions of their actual military infrastructure. Show me the discrepancies. The tactical display updated to compare initial survey results with current intelligence. The differences were striking. Underground facilities that had not appeared in orbital scans were now revealed to house advanced manufacturing capabilities. Orbital installations that had seemed to be civilian satellites were now displaying weapon signatures. Transportation networks that had appeared to be commercial infrastructure were now moving military equipment with efficiency that suggested dual-use design. Admiral, Sub-Admiral Zexcoin reported from the communication station. We're detecting increased electromagnetic activity from multiple human installations. The pattern suggests they are implementing some form of coordinated operational plan. What sort of plan? Unknown, but the timing appears to be synchronized across their entire planet. Whatever they are preparing, it will occur simultaneously at multiple locations within the next 6 hours. Admiral Vextar studied the tactical displays with growing concern. The humans were not behaving like any species he had encountered in 3 centuries of conquest operations. They were not panicking, not negotiating, not preparing defensive positions, and not showing any signs of the psychological pressure that had broken the will of countless other civilizations. Instead, they were implementing what appeared to be a carefully planned military operation that had been prepared in advance for exactly this scenario. They were treating his fleet not as an overwhelming force to be feared or negotiated with, but as a tactical problem to be solved through systematic analysis and coordinated action. Admiral, Sub-Admiral Kinthare said quietly, There is one more element of the human response that deserves your attention. Yes, their communications during this entire period have been transmitted on open frequencies that we can easily intercept. They have made no attempt to conceal their tactical discussions, intelligence analysis, or operational planning from our monitoring. Admiral Vextar's compound eyes focused intently on a subordinate. You think they want us to hear their communications? I think they want us to understand exactly what we are facing, Admiral. They're not trying to hide their capabilities or deceive us about their intentions. They're making certain that we know they are treating our entire fleet as prey to be hunted with precision. The Admiral returned his attention to the tactical displays, watching as human military forces continued their mysterious preparations across the planet below. For the first time in his career, he was facing an enemy that wanted him to know they were coming. The hunters, it seemed, wanted their prey to understand what was about to happen. The attack began exactly 47 hours after Admiral Vextar's ultimatum, and it began in ways that no hegemony tactical manual had ever contemplated. The first indication that something was happening came not from weapons fire or military maneuvers, but from the sudden appearance of objects that should not have existed in the vacuum of space between Earth and the hegemony fleet. Admiral, Sub-Admiral Zexcoin called out from his monitoring station, his elongated head displaying rapid color changes that indicated extreme agitation. We have multiple unidentified objects approaching the fleet perimeter. They were not present on sensors 60 seconds ago. Admiral Vextar moved quickly to the tactical display, his four arms working the control surfaces to enhance the sensor resolution. What he saw there challenged his understanding of human technological capabilities. Dozens of small objects were moving toward his fleet at velocities that should have been impossible for human propulsion systems, following approach vectors that demonstrated navigation precision far beyond what their apparent technology should have supported. Classification, he demanded. Unknown, Admiral. The objects are too small to be crewed vessels, but they are moving under obvious intelligent control. Mass approximately 50 kilograms each. No detectable energy signatures consistent with known human propulsion systems. Sub-Admiral Kenthare scuttled to the command pedestal, her multiple eyes analyzing the tactical data streams. Admiral, the approach vectors are highly irregular. The objects are not following ballistic trajectories or standard propulsion profiles. They appear to be adapting their courses in real time to avoid our defensive systems. Admiral Vextar watched as the mysterious objects continued their approach, their movement patterns displaying a level of tactical sophistication that was completely inconsistent with human technological assessments. Each object seemed to be analyzing hegemony defensive positions and adjusting its approach to exploit gaps in sensor coverage and weapons placement. Defensive systems to full readiness, he ordered. Target the approaching objects with point defense arrays. The inevitable Dominion's automated defense systems engaged, sending streams of plasma bolts toward the approaching objects. What happened next was unprecedented in Admiral Vextar's experience. The objects dodged, not with the predictable evasion patterns of missiles or drones, but with the adaptive responses of living creatures that could analyze incoming fire and react with supernatural agility. Admiral, Sub-Admiral Kenthare reported, her voice carrying notes of confusion and concern. Our defensive systems are achieving only 12% hit rates against the approaching objects. They appear to be using evasion algorithms that adapt to our firing patterns in real time. The tactical display showed objects weaving through the defensive fire with impossible precision, their courses shifting and adjusting in ways that suggested not just advanced programming, but active intelligence guiding each individual unit. As they drew closer to the fleet, their true nature became apparent through enhanced sensor analysis. They were not missiles or drones in any conventional sense. They were sophisticated robotic systems, each one equipped with advanced sensors, adaptive programming, and what appeared to be individual artificial intelligence. More disturbing, They were analyzing the hegemony fleet with the same systematic thoroughness that human communications had demonstrated over the past 2 days. The objects are conducting detailed scans of our hull configurations, weapons placements, and shield generators, Sub-Admiral Zexcohen reported. They are mapping our defensive capabilities with sensor resolution that exceeds our own internal monitoring systems. Admiral Vextar realized that the humans had not sent weapons. They'd sent scouts, robotic intelligence gathering systems that were studying his fleet with scientific precision while demonstrating technological capabilities that should not have existed. Distance to fleet perimeter? He asked. Closest objects will reach optimal scanning range in approximately 4 minutes. Admiral. Intensify defensive fire. Authorization for use of primary weapon systems. The order was unprecedented. Using primary plasma cannons against targets the size of fighter craft was like using orbital bombardment weapons against individual soldiers. But the plasma cannons were the only weapon systems with sufficient accuracy and power to guarantee hits against targets with such impossible evasion capabilities. The massive energy weapons of the hegemony fleet opened fire, filling the space around the approaching objects with destructive energy that could have reduced asteroids to vapor. The result was both successful and deeply disturbing. The plasma burst destroyed approximately half of the robotic scouts, but the remaining units adapted to the new threat with impossible speed. Instead of continuing their original approach patterns, the surviving scouts began using the debris and energy dispersal from their destroyed companions as cover. They analyzed the plasma cannon firing sequences and began timing their movements to exploit the brief recharge periods between shots. Most remarkably, they began coordinating their evasion patterns in ways that suggested real-time communication and tactical cooperation. Admiral, Sub-Admiral Kentare announced, the remaining objects have achieved optimal scanning range. They are conducting what appears to be complete structural analysis of our fleet. Admiral Vextar watched as the surviving robotic scouts performed their intelligence mission with mechanical precision. Each unit focused on different aspects of the fleet: weapon systems, shield generators, propulsion units, command and control centers, troop bay configurations, and life support systems. They were gathering the technical specifications necessary for targeted attacks against specific vulnerabilities. Estimated scanning completion time? He asked. At current analysis rates, approximately 8 minutes for complete fleet assessment. The Admiral made a decision that violated standard hegemony tactical doctrine. Instead of attempting to destroy the remaining scouts, he ordered the fleet to withdraw beyond their sensor range. The robotic units did not pursue. Instead, they maintained position and began transmitting their gathered intelligence back toward Earth using communication methods that hegemony sensors could detect but could not intercept or decode. Analysis complete, Sub-Admiral Zexcohen reported. The objects are returning to Earth using the same impossible propulsion systems that brought them here. Admiral Vextar studied the tactical aftermath of the encounter. The humans had demonstrated technological capabilities that exceeded their apparent development level by centuries. They had deployed intelligent robotic systems that could adapt to hegemony defensive measures in real time. They had gathered complete intelligence on fleet vulnerabilities while losing only half of their reconnaissance assets to the most advanced military technology in known space. Most disturbing of all, they had accomplished their mission with the calm efficiency of a species that had been planning for exactly this scenario for much longer than the hegemony had been aware of their existence. Sub-Admiral Kentare, Admiral Vextar said, "What is your assessment of human technological capabilities based on this encounter?" The arachnoid officer consulted her analysis displays before responding. "Admiral, the technology demonstrated by these reconnaissance systems suggests development levels far in advance of our initial assessments. The artificial intelligence, adaptive programming, and propulsion capabilities indicate a technological base that may be competitive with our own in certain areas. Recommendations: I recommend immediate revision of our tactical assumptions about human capabilities, Admiral. I also recommend preparation for follow-up operations that will likely exploit the intelligence gathered by their reconnaissance mission. As if summoned by her words, the communication systems activated to display an incoming transmission from Earth. General Morrison appeared on the main screen, her background showing the same sophisticated command center as before, but now the tactical displays behind her showed detailed schematics of the hegemony fleet. "Admiral Vextar," she began, "I hope you found our reconnaissance demonstration informative. We wanted to ensure that you understood the actual level of human technological capabilities before proceeding to the next phase of our response." Admiral Vextar found himself listening with complete attention. The human's tone remained professionally calm, but there was something in her expression that suggested satisfaction with the results of her robotic scouts. "As you have now observed, our initial technological assessments were somewhat incomplete. We have found it useful to maintain certain capabilities in reserve until they become tactically necessary." The display behind General Morrison shifted to show detailed technical specifications for hegemony fleet systems, analyzed and cataloged with precision that matched or exceeded the hegemony's own engineering documentation. "Our reconnaissance systems have now completed detailed analysis of your fleet capabilities, structural vulnerabilities, and tactical dispositions. This information has been distributed to all human military commands and integrated into our operational planning." General Morrison paused, and Admiral Vextar noticed that her expression carried the same predatory focus that he was beginning to associate with human military communications. "We have also completed analysis of your standard conquest protocols and identified the tactical assumptions that have enabled your success against other species. Your operational doctrine assumes that target civilizations will respond to superior force with predictable patterns: panic, negotiation attempts, disorganized resistance, or rapid surrender." The human leaned forward slightly, and her next words were delivered with absolute certainty. "These assumptions have created operational vulnerabilities that we intend to exploit. Your fleet is configured for intimidation and occupation rather than sustained combat operations. Your tactical formations are optimized for psychological impact rather than defensive efficiency. Your command structure is centralized in ways that create single points of failure." Admiral Vextar realized that the human was providing him with an accurate assessment of his fleet's tactical weaknesses, delivered with the dispassionate precision of a military professional analyzing an opponent's capabilities. "More significantly, Admiral, your entire strategic approach assumes that you will be facing an enemy that reacts to your presence. Species that attempt to defend fixed positions, negotiate from positions of weakness, or resist your advances through conventional military operations." General Morrison's expression shifted to display something that Admiral Vextar was beginning to recognize as the look of a predator that had completed its stalking phase and was ready to begin the hunt. "Humanity does not react to threats, Admiral Vextar. We eliminate them. We do not defend against superior force. We identify its weaknesses and destroy it with precision strikes designed to exploit specific vulnerabilities. We do not negotiate with invaders. We study them like specimens and then systematically dismantle their capabilities until they are no longer a threat." The communication system displayed new tactical information, real-time monitoring of hegemony fleet positions, updated continuously as ships moved through their formations. The humans were tracking every vessel in his fleet with precision that matched his own command systems. "Your reconnaissance mission has provided us with the final intelligence necessary to complete our operational planning. We now know exactly how to neutralize your technological advantages, exploit your tactical weaknesses, and systematically destroy your fleet's combat effectiveness." General Morrison stood, and the camera angle adjusted to show her full military bearing. Behind her, the command center was clearly preparing for major operations, with officers coordinating activities across multiple tactical displays. "Admiral Vextar, you have attempted to intimidate humanity with superior numbers and advanced technology. This approach has been successful against other species because they responded to your threat with fear and reactive behavior. The human's voice carried absolute conviction as she delivered her final statement. You are about to discover what happens when you threaten a species that responds to superior force not with fear, but with the systematic precision of apex predators that have identified vulnerable prey. The communication ended, and Admiral Vextar found himself staring at tactical displays that showed his fleet surrounded by monitoring systems that tracked every movement, analyzed every tactical adjustment, and provided real-time intelligence to human forces that had demonstrated technological capabilities far beyond initial assessments. For the first time in his 3-century military career, Admiral Vextar understood that he was not the hunter in this engagement. The realization came with perfect clarity. From the moment his fleet had entered the human system, they had been the ones being hunted. The humans had used his own intimidation period to gather intelligence, analyze capabilities, and prepare countermeasures. They had allowed him to demonstrate his technological advantages while they identified the weaknesses those advantages created. The species that refused to negotiate had spent 47 hours learning exactly how to kill him and his entire fleet with surgical precision. The hunt, Admiral Vextar realized, was about to begin in earnest. The systematic destruction of the 5th Conquest Fleet began at precisely 0400 Earth Standard Time, 71 hours and 37 minutes after Admiral Vextar's ultimatum. It began not with massive displays of firepower or frontal assaults, but with a series of small, precise actions that demonstrated humanity's understanding of how to kill a technologically superior enemy through surgical application of force to critical vulnerabilities. The first strike came from a direction that Admiral Vextar had not even considered as tactically relevant: the system's asteroid belt. Long-range sensors detected multiple objects separating from what had appeared to be ordinary space debris, accelerating toward the fleet with propulsion signatures that were barely detectable above background radiation. Admiral, Subadmiral Kentare reported, her voice carrying the controlled urgency of a professional recognizing an unprecedented tactical situation. We have approximately 200 objects inbound from the asteroid belt. Estimated arrival time, 43 minutes. The object appeared to be using extremely low-emission propulsion systems. Admiral Vextar examined the sensor data with growing unease. The approaching objects were too large to be the reconnaissance drones that had conducted intelligence-gathering operations 2 days earlier, but they were moving with the same impossible coordination and adaptive behavior that had characterized human robotic systems. Classification and threat assessment, he ordered. Mass approximately 500 kilograms each. Propulsion systems appear to be some form of reaction drive, but with exhaust signatures that are nearly undetectable. Current velocity suggests they will achieve significant kinetic energy upon impact. Sub-Admiral Zexcoin looked up from his communication station, his elongated head displaying the color patterns that indicated severe concern. Admiral, we're receiving no communications from the approaching objects. They appear to be operating under complete electronic silence. Admiral Vextar realized that the humans had positioned weapons in the asteroid belt before his fleet's arrival, disguised as space debris and waiting for the optimal moment to strike. The implications of such advanced preparation suggested planning that extended far beyond the 72 hours since first contact. Time to intercept with defensive systems? He asked. Optimal firing solutions will be available in 37 minutes, Admiral. However, the objects are approaching on vectors that will require significant adjustment of fleet positioning to achieve effective defensive coverage. The tactical display showed the approaching objects following courses that would bring them into contact with the hegemony fleet from multiple angles simultaneously. Each object was positioned to exploit gaps in the fleet's defensive coverage, requiring the ships to break formation and expose other vulnerabilities in order to effectively engage the incoming threats. They are forcing us to choose between defensive positioning and formation integrity, Admiral Vextar observed. Correct, Admiral. If we maintain current formation, approximately 30% of the incoming objects will reach their targets. If we adjust positioning for optimal defensive coverage, we will create gaps that could be exploited by follow-up attacks. Admiral Vextar made the decision that tactical doctrine required: maintain formation integrity and accept losses to preserve fleet operational capability. It was the correct military decision based on 3,000 years of successful conquest operations. It was also exactly the decision that human intelligence analysis had predicted he would make. The kinetic weapons struck the hegemony fleet with precision that demonstrated intimate knowledge of hegemony ship design and tactical doctrine. Instead of targeting the largest or most heavily armed vessels, the human weapons focused on specific systems that were critical to fleet operations but not heavily protected: communication arrays, sensor clusters, shield generators, and propulsion control systems. Each impact was calculated to disable rather than destroy, creating maximum operational disruption while preserving the ships as intact targets for follow-up attacks. Within minutes, 37 hegemony vessels had suffered critical system failures that eliminated their ability to participate effectively in combat operations without actually destroying them. Damage assessment. Admiral Vextar commanded as the fleet's communication systems worked to re-establish coordination between ships that had lost primary communication capabilities. 37 vessels with critical system damage, Sub-Admiral Kenthare reported. No complete destruction, but significant operational degradation. The human weapons appear to have been specifically designed to disable our systems rather than destroy our ships. Admiral Vextar studied the tactical aftermath of the attack. The humans had achieved something that no enemy in his experience had ever attempted. They had reduced his fleet's combat effectiveness by approximately 12% while expending minimal resources and without engaging in direct combat. More disturbing, the precision of the attack suggested detailed knowledge not just of hegemony ship configurations, but of hegemony tactical doctrine and decision-making processes. The humans had predicted exactly how he would respond to their attack, and had positioned their weapons to exploit the vulnerabilities that his response would create. Admiral, Sub-Admiral Zexcohen announced, "We're receiving another transmission from Earth." The main display activated to show General Morrison, but the background had changed. Instead of the command center, she appeared to be standing in what looked like an observation deck overlooking a massive underground facility filled with military equipment and personnel. "Admiral Vextar," she began, "I trust you found our opening demonstration informative. We wanted to ensure that you understood several important aspects of human military doctrine before we proceed to more intensive operations." Admiral Vextar found himself listening with complete attention. The human's tone remained professionally calm, but there was something in her expression that suggested deep satisfaction with the results of the kinetic weapon attack. "First, you should understand that the weapons that just struck your fleet were positioned in our asteroid belt approximately 18 months ago. We have been preparing for the arrival of a hegemony conquest fleet since we first made contact with refugees from your previous campaigns." The display behind General Morrison showed detailed intelligence files on hegemony military operations, conquest patterns, and tactical doctrine. The information was more comprehensive than Admiral Vextar's own strategic briefings. "Second, you should understand that our attack was designed not to destroy your ships, but to demonstrate our understanding of your operational vulnerabilities. We could have targeted your reactors, weapons systems, or crew compartments. Instead, we chose to disable specific systems that would reduce your combat effectiveness while preserving your ships as targets for our primary offensive operations." General Morrison paused, and Admiral Vextar noticed that her expression carried the same predatory focus that had characterized all human military communications. "Third, and most importantly, you should understand that what you have just experienced was not our attack. It was our final intelligence gathering operation. We wanted to observe how your fleet would respond to coordinated strikes against predicted vulnerabilities. Your tactical response has provided us with the last piece of information we needed to complete our operational planning." The human leaned forward, and her next words were delivered with absolute certainty. Admiral Vextar, your fleet is now completely surrounded by weapon systems that have been analyzing your capabilities, learning your tactical patterns, and identifying your weaknesses for the past 72 hours. You are not facing a desperate defense by a primitive civilization. You're trapped in a carefully prepared hunting ground by a species that has spent 18 months learning exactly how to kill you. The communication system displayed new information, real-time tactical displays showing the positions of weapon systems throughout the solar system. Admiral Vextar stared at the data with growing horror as he realized the true scope of human preparations. The asteroid belt contained not dozens, but thousands of kinetic weapons, all targeted at specific hegemony vessels and programmed with detailed technical specification for maximum system disruption. The orbital space around Earth was filled with defensive platforms that had been disguised as civilian infrastructure. The planet's surface housed weapons installations that were now revealed to have ranges and power levels that exceeded anything in human technological assessments. Most terrifying of all, the tactical displays showed that every weapon system was connected to a coordinated fire control network that was tracking every ship in his fleet with precision that matched his own command systems. "We know the exact position of every vessel in your fleet," General Morrison continued. "We know your current damage status, your remaining operational capabilities, and your tactical options. We have analyzed your command structure, identified your key personnel, and prepared countermeasures for every response option available to you." The human stood, and the camera angle adjusted to show the full scope of the military facility behind her. Thousands of personnel were coordinating operations across tactical displays that showed the complete strategic situation. "Your ultimatum gave us 72 hours to prepare for unconditional surrender," General Morrison said, her voice carrying the absolute conviction of someone delivering a statement of fact rather than a threat. "We have used those 72 hours to prepare for your unconditional destruction." Admiral Vextar realized that he was facing a tactical situation that was completely outside his experience or training. The humans had not responded to his ultimatum with fear, negotiation, or conventional resistance. They had responded by transforming their entire star system into a trap designed specifically to destroy technologically superior invading forces. "Admiral," General Morrison continued, "you are about to experience what happens when a species that has evolved as apex predators decides to hunt something that considers itself the dominant force in the galaxy." The communication ended, and immediately every sensor system on the inevitable Dominion began registering massive energy signatures from across the human star system. Weapon systems that had been hidden, disguised, or powered down for days were now activating simultaneously. "Admiral," Sub-Admiral Kinthare called out, "we're detecting weapons activation from over 3,000 separate sources. Estimated combined firepower exceeds our fleet's defensive capabilities by a factor of 12. Admiral Vextar stared at the tactical displays as the true scope of human military preparations became apparent. They had not spent 18 months building weapons to fight the hegemony. They had spent 18 months building a trap to hunt them. The asteroid belt erupted with kinetic weapons moving at velocities that would turn hegemony ships into expanding clouds of debris. Orbital platforms around Earth revealed themselves as sophisticated missile batteries with targeting systems that had been tracking his fleet since its arrival. Ground-based installations opened to reveal energy weapons with power levels that could penetrate hegemony shields and hull plating. But most terrifying of all were the weapons that appeared in empty space around his fleet, rising from stealth positions where they had been waiting within human patience for exactly this moment. These were not the crude projectile weapons or primitive energy systems that human technology should have supported. These were sophisticated military systems that demonstrated technological capabilities equal to or superior to anything the hegemony had developed. "How is this possible?" Admiral Vextar asked, his compound eyes trying to process tactical information that challenged everything he understood about human civilization. "Admiral," Sub-Admiral Kinthare replied, her voice carrying the controlled terror of someone recognizing their imminent destruction. I believe the humans have been concealing their actual technological capabilities for much longer than 18 months. The coordination and sophistication of these systems suggest development programs that may have been underway for decades. The systematic destruction of the Fifth Conquest Fleet began with mathematical precision. Human weapons systems engaged hegemony vessels in carefully coordinated strikes that targeted specific vulnerabilities identified through months of intelligence analysis. Each ship was engaged by multiple weapon systems simultaneously, overwhelming defensive capabilities and eliminating tactical options. But the humans did not simply destroy the fleet. They hunted each vessel with the patient precision of predators that understood their prey completely. Ships that attempted to flee were intercepted by weapons positioned along predicted escape routes. Vessels that tried to form defensive formations were engaged by coordinated attacks that exploited the tactical weaknesses such formations created. Ships that attempted to communicate surrender were destroyed before they could complete their transmissions. Admiral Vextar watched his fleet being systematically dismantled by an enemy that had studied hegemony tactics so thoroughly that they could predict and counter every possible response. The humans were not fighting his fleet. They were executing it with surgical precision. In less than 40 minutes, the Fifth Conquest Fleet ceased to exist as an operational military force. 300 warships, representing the accumulated military might of the galactic hegemony, had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris by a species that was supposed to be primitive, divided, and technologically inferior. Admiral Vextar found himself standing alone on the bridge of the inevitable Dominion, the only vessel that remained intact. His crew was dead, his fleet was destroyed, and his communication systems had been left functional for reasons he was beginning to understand. The main display activated one final time to show General Morrison, her background now showing the tactical displays that confirmed the complete success of a human operation. "Admiral Vextar," she said, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a predator that had successfully completed a hunt. "You are the sole survivor of your fleet because we want you to deliver a message to the galactic hegemony." Admiral Vextar listened with the complete attention of someone who had just witnessed the impossible. Humanity does not negotiate with invaders. We do not surrender to superior force. We do not respond to threats with fear or desperation. General Morrison leaned forward, and her final words were delivered with absolute certainty. "We respond to threats by studying them with scientific precision, identifying their weaknesses with systematic thoroughness, and then hunting them with the patient efficiency of apex predators that have evolved to kill anything that threatens our survival." The human's expression carried no anger, no hatred, and no emotion beyond professional satisfaction at a job completed successfully. "Tell your hegemony, Admiral, that Earth is under the protection of a species that considers the galaxy's most feared conquerors to be nothing more than prey animals that have forgotten what it means to be hunted." The communication ended, leaving Admiral Vextar alone with the ruins of his fleet and the knowledge that humanity had just announced itself to the galaxy as the new apex predator.